Alright guys, here is my cell energy video. Usually I have my little face on there, but for some reason my camera is not working, so we're going to have to do it this way. Okay, so we all know energy. Energy for living organisms comes from their food, but it only comes from food for organisms that eat food. What about for plants? For plants, it comes from the sun, and you should already remember this kind of when we talked about autotrophs and heterotrophs. So in this diagram, you can see the sun and water produces energy for these plants, and the energy in those plants is consumed by consumers, okay, animals that eat plants, herbivores. And then the animals that eat the other animals, the carnivores or omnivores, okay, can eat them. And then when they die, they get broken down by the decomposers or the detrivores. And it's just a big cycle, okay? So that's the energy cycle. Autotrophs, as a quick reminder, are organisms that use energy, light energy from the sun to produce food. If you remember, the word auto means self, so self-producing. Examples would be plants and some microorganisms. Remember, we talked about the different microorganisms, the different protists and bacteria that can produce their own energy, and are autotrophs. Heterotrophs are organisms that cannot use the sun's energy to make food. These examples of these are like animals and most microorganisms. Okay, so cell energy. So cell's usable source of energy is called ATP. ATP stands for adenosine triphosphate. You will not have to know that, but ATP stands for adenosine triphosphate. There's also another form of it called ADP, and ADP is the unenergized form of ATP. So ATP is energy. ADP is the unenergized form of ATP, and ADP stands for adenosine diphosphate. These prefixes may look familiar. Triphosphate means 3. Diphosphate means 2. So adenosine triphosphate, or ATP, is going to mean adenosine, the adenine and the ribose, and then 3 phosphate groups, triphosphate, 3 phosphates, 1, 2, 3. ADP, which is adenosine diphosphate, di means 2, so you're going to see the adenosine, the adenine, and the ribose, and then 2 phosphate groups, 1, 2, diphosphate, 1, 2. Cell energy. So storing energy, all energy is stored in the bonds of compounds. Breaking the bonds releases that energy. So in these bonds, these areas right in between here, okay, that's what stores the energy. So when you break those bonds, it releases energy. So the most energetic bond is this one right here in between the second and the third phosphate. And when we break that bond, we release energy. Okay, and when we want to store energy, we build that bond by adding a phosphate. So this is adenosine diphosphate. See, there are only 2 phosphate groups. When we have some extra energy, okay, we're going to take that energy and we're going to add this 3rd phosphate on, and a lot of energy is stored in that bond, and now we have a fully charged battery. ATP is like a fully charged battery. When we are ready to use that energy, ATP is converted into ADP by breaking the bond between the 2nd and 3rd phosphate groups, releasing its energy for the cell process. So here we have ATP. Remember, we've got adenosine and then the 3 phosphates. And when we are ready to break it, we break that bond, we get energy release. We have a free phosphate that floats around, and then we have only 2 phosphates. And now this is adenosine triphosphate. Or excuse me, diphosphate. Excuse me, adenosine diphosphate. Now, when we're ready to put this phosphate back onto here, we need to add energy, and we'll add the energy and then put that extra phosphate back on, and the energy will be stored in this bond. So cells must obtain and use energy to stay alive. Autotrophs must make their own food, and they're going to do this through 2 processes, photosynthesis and cellular respiration. Heterotrophs must get their food, and they get their food basically by eating it, but once they get it, they're going to digest this food through a process called cellular respiration. So autotrophs do both photosynthesis and cellular respiration. Heterotrophs only do cellular respiration. Photosynthesis. So photosynthesis is the process where the energy from the sunlight is converted into the energy of glucose. Notice that it's not converted into the energy of ATP, even though cells use ATP. Okay, it's converted into glucose, and glucose is a sugar. And what it does is we get sunlight, carbon dioxide, which is what we breathe out, and water, and in comes all three of those things, and out we are going to release oxygen and glucose. Okay, this glucose, this sugar molecule, and the sugar isn't actually going to leave, it's just going to be made. Okay, and that's basically the whole process of photosynthesis is sunlight and carbon dioxide and water go in, and then we have some chemical reactions, and the leaf is going to release oxygen and it's going to store the glucose. The other process, cellular respiration, is a process by which the energy of glucose is converted into ATP. So now we're going to take that glucose, okay, that we made in photosynthesis or that we ate when we ate something, and we are going to convert it into ATP that the cell can actually use for life processes like reproduction, responding to its environment, and maintaining homeostasis. For humans specifically, it converts chemical energy into the ATP for growth, warmth, and movement. So that's cellular energy. I hope that makes sense. Write down any questions you have.